So
How was the meeting? Or the
good.
How was the court?
It's a little bit close for me.
Awesome.
Need a little space.
Yeah. I haven't seen Lori ever. She's right up at the house.
We still need to be really tight on these.
You don't have your notes. Like the talking points. Do you remember what you sent me?
I don't think I do.
It was like.
Misinformation.
The planning board one or which one?
No, we never, just meeting.
I don't think I have those on.
No, the one that you printed and it's like.
Oh, no, I don't have
So this meeting.
that. Yes. I know which one you're talking about. I don't.
All right. The 5:30 is a hard start. It's a little faster. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. May we have roll call, please? Yes?
Present.
Here.
Here.
Here. We'll now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda, we will have public comment. Individuals are reminded that public comments should be limited to items over which the City Commission has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power, as well as be reminded that if it's further in the agenda that we will discuss an item, please wait to bring it to the commission until then. Public comment, please.
Leslie, good evening. Leslie Feigl, Livingston Chamber of Commerce, CVB, TBID. Tonight, I wanted to ask you briefly, I still have not heard back regarding the bylaws for the TBID, and so I needed to know the status. We are already collecting at this point. However, our board needs to, which meets tomorrow. It's been over 30 days, and we simply need to know where the bylaws stand. Mr. Portine.
We just haven't had a chance to get to it yet. So we'll put that on the front burner and we'll get to it this week.
Okay. And on that note, met with Mr. Cam Shawley, as new superintendent, came to our meeting last week. It was pretty great. he is also from this area, as you know. He is forwarding us actual direct information so that our hoteliers through the TBID could use it for the subject that we had brought up a couple of weeks ago. Melissa, thank you very much. To be able to help our travelers better understand how to behave properly when they go into the parks and in our area. So that's pretty cool. Also, just wanted to inform you, we are started with the CVB. Our new marketing plan numbers have now opened. We are looking at $32,000 this year for our starting point for our new marketing plan. We are going to sit with the TAC tomorrow and look at some of the new rollout programs. So we got a lot of really exciting stuff coming this way. So
Leslie, would you mind telling everyone what the acronyms stand for?
I get
I
asked
know
that all
we
the time.
do, and you're so fast
I'm
at
so
them
sorry.
that- yeah.
The Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is our tourism marketing piece here for Livingston and Park County. So, and the TBID, Tourism Business Improvement District. And I'm done.
Thank you. Come on up.
Patricia Grabo, 204 East Calendar Street. A point of clarification. Can one make public comment on item A and item B under action items when those come up?
Not right now,
Not-
but when they're
when they-
up on the, yes.
Because
Of
I
course,
didn't want
yeah.
to.
Nope.
I didn't want to make that as public comment. I wanted to respond if I can.
Right.
Okay, I'll do
Yep.
that. The other thing is I wanted to speak to this body just briefly. A number of years ago, this body wrote a resolution to support the concept of rail passenger service back to Livingston, Montana. And the route would be from Spokane to Missoula to Helena to Livingston as the entrance to Yellowstone and Billings and back. It's called a diesel modular unit. It is like the rail passenger service between Anchorage, Alaska and Fairbanks, Alaska, which also deals with coal trains. That is moving fairly quickly forward. On Thursday, I'm meeting with Billings regarding rail passenger service. It looks like they may put forth a resolution. Every community along the route, Missoula, Helena, Livingston, has a resolution that they may consider renewing. And Billings, if they come up with a resolution, it will be pretty significant as a lobby tool. Also, I'm going to Helena this next week to meet with the legislature regarding there is a potential bill that will consider looking at rail passenger service very seriously and looking at potential funding. Now, this is a simple rail passenger service. It is not Amtrak. It is called a diesel modular unit. It carries 93 people on it. It costs $6 million to buy. It is private sector. Montana Rail Link has assured us that they would treat us just like any other customer. It is appropriate for this line. It's a very doable possibility. So I wanted to inform the commission of this effort that we've been putting forth, I think almost 10 years, but it's beginning to look like it's a possibility. So I wanted to let this commission know, keep them informed as to how we progress because it's been a resolution of the city commission, and just let you know as things progress.
Thank you, Patricia. All right. Any other public comment? Last call. Okay, moving on to consent items. Do we have a motion from the commission on consent items A through C, or any that you would like to have pulled for consideration or discussion?
Make a motion to approve consent items A, B, and C.
Second.
I have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes,
Four.
4.
Or
Yes.
motion passes. Tonight, we have no proclamations, no scheduled public comments. We have 2 public hearings. Our first public hearing is resolution number 4835, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the submission of Community Development Block Grant Program application and calling for public hearing. This is our first reading. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just a resolution authorizing us to submit a request for a grant from the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. This is an infrastructure grant up to $450,000. This one is particularly for a project to put the Civic Center and areas in Sacagawea Park onto our city sewer system. Actually, those are both on septic or vault toilets right now. So they are not hooked up to the city sanitation sewer system. This would hook them into that and allow for expansion in the future as well. If we wanted other facilities in that area, we could hook them up to this sewer main. So it would be a project this summer. It would cost all of the $450,000 and a little extra. The closest route due to Fleshman Creek would be to go to the main in front of the school. So it'd go through the school parking lot that direction, east.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on resolution number, oh, I have to open this public hearing. Let me start that over. This public hearing on resolution number 4835 is open. Please come up and give us your public comment.
Mike Gomez, 611 North D Street. This is one of the projects that the Parks and Trails Committee initiated many, many years ago. We came up with a request to have the city do an engineering study to see if how much would it cost to connect the sewer system up to the Civic Center. A lot of people didn't know that the Civic Center and Sacagawea Park had absolutely no sewer system at all. It's just a septic tank and drain fields, which weren't very carefully planned out. They got 2 lines going down behind the skate park, and on top of that, they put a couple of trees between the lines. So the best way to destroy a drain field is to put trees in it. So I don't know whether that thing's working or not. The restrooms down at Sacagawea Park are flush toilets, but then again, it's also a septic system. Back in the old days when we used to have floods, couldn't flush the toilets, because the groundwater was higher than the drain field. So we've had problems with that in the past. There is great potential for Mouse Park to become something great for the city, for the county, for the community. We're planning on, there's a group of people planning on doing music events throughout the summer. It'd be nice to have nice clean restrooms for when we have like Summerfest or weddings and so forth and so on. And we're still probably gonna need the rest of the porta potties and stuff like that for the number of people who show up, but still it'd be nice to have something, we can kind of be proud of when people from out of state come and visit and stuff like that. So that's a great cause, and I hope we did get an estimate on the cost. What was it, Mike? Was it $295 for the connection?
I think the most recent one was like $450.
Okay, at the time I think it was $290,000. So it's pretty good. I think it's good money, well, spent if we get to connect it. So it's about time. That thing was built in the 30s by the Works Progress Administration. Has never had any kind of sewer hookup to it, so it's about time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Any other public comment?
Yes, hi. Leslie Feigl, 303 East Park Street, Livingston Chamber. Recently, I met with the LBSA Livingston Baseball Softball Association and Regina Wood and association regarding the high school baseball team. And the LBSA, this was one of the things that came up was the bathrooms. I actually wasn't planning on speaking this night, but it's in support of what moving forward with this grant project. Is extremely important. Next year in 2020, the tournament for the LBSA is going to be hosted over in at the park. And I was dropping off an application package with Lisa at the Civic Center building, and we started discussing what their desires were. And one of the biggest problems is when they hold their season, which is April through pretty much October. All the teams from all around the community that come to play. There's 24 kids that's on the teams, or there's 24 kids that usually play daily, plus the other team, plus the parents, all using those bathrooms, which are in serious need of repair, amongst other things, which is the fences and other items. But when it comes to the bathrooms themselves, and I went down and took a look at them, and holy cow, we really need some help. The season does start in April. I understand that it's not something that can be done by April, but knowing that, it would be started and then hopefully completed before the tournaments play and coming to town next year would be wonderful. And then also, connecting them with the TBID so that we could start that ball rolling and actually put out there for more of these tournaments to come to Livingston, which just means more dollars in, our pockets, from the hotels to the restaurants and here in the city. So, again, I really hope that you think seriously about connecting the facilities, and so that, tear them down, make pretty ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other public comment? You're not supposed to, but Mike, because you have tried really hard to get this project going, I'm going to give you a few more seconds.
Okay, just another thing, the Civic Center is actually the disaster preparedness shelter. We when we had the Pine Creek fire, we had it set up with cots and stuff like that. But they got showers and flush toilets and stuff like that. But again, it just drains to one big tank, and there's no septic system or sewer system up there. So, thank you.
Good point.
Pardon me. Jake Keeper, 325 South Main. In regards to the resolution that you're talking about, I'm just wondering if I know you can't address the answer, but probably Mike could. Can you tell me why, when there was a bid for $295,000 several years ago, that this was never elevated as a matter of priority with the city? And can you give me a time frame? What year that was as far as the bid? The $295,000
a bid, it was just,
or quote
it's a study.
estimate?
It's just a pre-engineering or
Okay.
preliminary study. It had nothing to do with actual money.
Okay.
So I do recall this, Jay, the study said to hook up the sewer to that area, all those areas in the park and near the park. It would cost about $295,000. I recall that the study did it hook to somewhere different as well?
Did it go through? I don't know where that went.
I feel like it wasn't hooking up to the same location. It was, okay. But at this time, now we're moving forward with looking at this as a grant possibility. So at the time, either could have been a transition, it could have been not at the top of our priority,
Might not have been available.
might not have had granting funding. I'm not sure of the reason why we didn't move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Any other public comment? So this public hearing of resolution number 4835 is now closed. City commissioners, do we have any questions on resolution number 4835?
I just have one. Are we going to try to start this year or in the fall or something?
I think when's the grant award? Do we know? July. So we'd try to get it done this fall.
Yeah, after the baseball season, because
Probably wouldn't be after baseball season because they go pretty late. I think they go through
we've got to
October.
go through at least one field.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
So-
curious how it would impact that.
We would probably have to try and get them moved to some of those other
Yeah, well,
inactive
we've got
fields. Right.
All right. That's the only thing I'm concerned with.
Any other questions? I have one. No? My question is, as far as the cost, does it only cover the hookup to the sewer system, the whole system, the sewer itself, or are there some bathrooms improvements and hookups with the bathrooms in general?
So this current, well, obviously we don't have a quote yet, but the intent of the grant would be to get the main run all the way from in front of the high school, back through the parking lot, through the baseball field. So it's available for the Civic Center, Miles Park, and all the way into Sacagawea Park. So the main would be there, as well as hookups, I think, for the Civic Center. And there's the picture of it if you want to kind of see where it would ding. So it would cover most of the main. May be able to get some connections from the Civic Center. It wouldn't cover the pool yet, and it would be available for Sacagawea, but it wouldn't actually hook everything in, depending on where the bids came in.
So then, like the baseball association might fundraise to improve the bathrooms,
Sure. So it would then be available to all those entities.
or we would have priorities from Parks and Trails to improve the bathrooms, for example.
And the primary priority is going to be to get the Civic Center itself on, because especially during the winter months, we can have up to 1,000, people a week in the Civic Center. So that's probably the number one priority, and then we can go from there.
All right, great, thank you. Any other commissioner questions? This is our first reading, so we don't need to.
One thing on that, because of the time constraints of the grant application, the next public hearing will actually be held on the 28th. It'll just be a meeting here in the community room. It won't be a commission meeting. So this will be the last time you guys see it, but we will hold another public hearing for public input on the 28th at 5:30, I think. Yep.
Yes. So, public hearing
Yeah.
to address, to move this forward, or will be on the 28th. Next on our agenda, we have resolution number 4838, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending the fee for residential variance applications and calling for a public hearing. This
You
is
guys
our,
do have to vote on it.
yes, we do, sorry.
But that was really good.
Thanks.
Practice.
So do we have a motion from the commission on resolution number 4835?
I move, we accept resolution 4835.
Second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Newts. Roll call, please. Yes.
4.
4.
4.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have resolution number 4838, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending the fee for residential variance applications and calling for a public hearing. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the second and final reading for this change of fees. This one was driven by our change in process for the variances. We've talked about it a couple of times before. Because the city staff will be doing more work prior to requiring any payment, the fee needs to go up just to cover costs. And it is going from $100 to $250.
Thank you. This public hearing is open for resolution number 4838. Please come on up. Any public comment on resolution number 4838? This public hearing is closed. City Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions? No questions? I have one. where, so as far as the people who paid their $100 to the, now the newest applicants after this passes or doesn't pass, at 250, as far as the people in that $100 range where we have started the process, are we finished with working them through as far as approval or not concerning their variance requests?
I don't think we're through all of them yet. Jim, can you give us an update on that? Do you know where we're at? How many of those have we gone through?
One has chosen to go forward, and the other three are still pending to determine whether they wish a hearing. So they should be through the system first meeting in April.
Okay, and they will come to us then at that time, the variance request, because we've changed it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the one that has chosen to go ahead will definitely come in front of you, and then the other three will decide whether they want to continue forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, do we have a motion on resolution number 4838?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 4838.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes?
4.
4.
4.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have no ordinances. We have 4 resolutions. First on our resolutions is resolution number 4836, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign all documents required to execute change order number G4 to the general construction contract with Dick Anderson Construction for the Livingston Water Reclamation Facility Upgrade Project, pending formal USDA-RD's concurrence. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've been talking about this one for a while. The majority of the cost increase of this is from the new requirements for the explosion-proof ventilation system in the solids handling building in the dewatering area. I'm going to have our Public Works Director come up and just walk you through it real quick, and you can ask questions. So Shannon, if you would.
Right. Good evening.
Aye.
And I'm hoping that this will be fairly straightforward since most of you attended the last tour that we held here about a month ago. So change order 4, really, I can go through each item one by one if you like, or if you have any questions or need clarification on certain request numbers, I'd be happy to explain those in more detail. So whatever you prefer.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
On page 68, there was field testing identified 2 batches of concrete with compressive strength lower than specified. It's the first bullet point under A3.01.
Yes.
I would think that responsibility is more to the concrete provider. That part of that $12,000, I don't know how that breaks down, but whatever part of the 12,000 involved the inferior concrete, I don't think we should be responsible for it unless I'm not understanding.
You're absolutely correct. And that was something that was a result of TD&H's quality control, doing all the concrete testing that they did in the project. I think it was just part of the example that AA2S or Scott used for some of their additional services. Obviously, we were involved in how that played out, and their as TD&H's structural engineer, that was back when we were constructing the tanks.
So I'm going to jump in real quick because this was a confusing one. That $12,000 isn't actually part of the change order. That was what it cost us in additional engineering. All the actual concrete work was done by the contract provider at no cost to us because it was their failure. So this is just, and it's like a third layer. This is AE2S's request for more money for construction management over the extra $12,000 that TD&H spent to cover the failure of the concrete. So it's like 3 layers deep. It's not actually, that $12,000 isn't part of this. That was already covered. This is just AE2S saying we spent extra time managing the contract because it took longer, and here are the reasons why it took longer. Does that make sense? It's like,
Not totally. I mean,
It's
they've caused the concrete providers caused the situation where the additional engineering had to be done. Is that correct, or am I not?
yes.
So that should sort of bounce back on the provider, I would think. I'm not.
That original amount did.
Oh, okay.
The 12,000 did. So the 12, that's where it's confusing. That 12,000 isn't actually part of AE2S's request. Then that's where it's.
Okay.
So both of our consultants have errors and omissions insurance. So it was up to Scott Bucher, our project manager for A2S, to make sure that if there was a failed material on this project, that responsibility goes back to the general contractor, Dick Anderson, and then they work with their subs. So while this is used as an example for some of the additional structural engineering TD&H completed during the project, the city was not charged for the additional work due to the failed material.
Thank you.
And I apologize that was actually on a second resolution. That's the engineering side of an engineering amendment, and I'm here to answer any questions that Dick Anderson's asking for the $258,000 change order.
Thank you.
Okay.
Which the bulk of, again, like Mike mentioned earlier, the bulk of this is the dewatering building and bringing it up to the current NFPA codes, Class 1, Div 2, which requires the air handler and 6 air changes per hour for the staff to work in there safely.
So through each item. I wouldn't mind if you just did a quick, start to finish on each item. I personally would like to hear. Well, are you guys okay with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. It's a lot of money, so I want to make sure
I've
we.
read everything and nothing jumped out at me, but by all means.
Okay. So change order request number 1 was the headworks piping and additional demo. There again, the piping that's in the headworks is a proprietary plastic piping that we do not have the ability or the tools to do any repairs. We are going to replace all of that with Schedule 80 PVC pipe and all the corroded brass and copper piping that's in that headworks building due to the corrosive nature of the atmosphere in there. Change order number 2 is a pipe gallery piping. There again, the pipe gallery, if you've been on a tour, it's rather tight. So this was for some additional work to clear up some more space for us in the future if we ever have to remove and replace any of the equipment in that pipe gallery. Dewatering building, number 3, there again, that's the large one. This one has certainly been several months in the making. It's involved the state electrical inspector, the fire chief, myself, many discussions with electrical engineers. And this is the final result of that. It requires adding a air handler, which has a 12-week lead time, a fair amount of electrical wiring work. We're going to put in some alarm systems that measure the atmosphere and make sure that we don't have any hydrogen sulfide or methanes or any chemicals like that in the air or any explosive gases. So that's the large one. telescoping platform or the valve for the platform. That just gives us more maintenance ability for the WAS holding tanks.
Can we just back up real quick?
Yes.
Can I ask a question just on, back on change order 3? Is this as a result of the change in regulations?
It is not. And if you want the honest truth, when the Huber press was put in there over 10 years ago, the whole facility should have been upgraded at that time. So the codes have not changed.
Okay, wait, I'm just not, okay.
So the WAS holding basins are the two round tanks. They were the primary
Basically had
clarifiers.
nothing to do with the original contract anyway, right?
It did not. No, this was a result of losing our heaters during the construction process and trying to include any of those repairs, with our funding agencies and this
Yeah,
current contract.
I forgot which building it was. It makes sense now. Since it's an existing building, it's not new. Okay.
So the telescoping valve platforms, those are custom made by Dick Anderson just to give us more maintenance opportunities with the valve operation for the WAS holding basins. Stilling wells for the transducers, number 5. There again, if you've seen the WAS holding basins and when the aerators are on, the liquid is moving around rather violently. These wells are basically pipes, keep the transducers from being acceptable or susceptible to that violent movement of the liquids in that basin, and we can accurately measure the levels. The influent pump station, additional fittings there again, we have a wet well at that location, and installing some of the new pumps for the upgrades. It was determined that a couple fittings that were included on original as-builts were actually not there. And when we cleaned out that wet well, that was discovered, and this is the cost for basically an additional 90-degree elbow to make the connection. Additional weighted check to the WAS holding basins. Due to the hydraulics of the above ground tanks, once we fired the SBR system up, it was determined that because of the pressure head with the tanks being full, that we were actually getting some water that was pushing from the tanks to the WAS holding basins. So this check valve prohibits that from occurring. EFR, potable water to headworks. They're working on that. Started yesterday, actually. We're very proud to have effluent reuse, and we can use recycled water for our maintenance on the facility instead of using the city's potable water. Another issue where as-built showed one thing, and once we started investigating and doing demolition, it was determined that the line that should have been 2-inch was actually only a 3/4-inch line. So a lot of our headworks, grit removal, screens take a lot of water, and we certainly want to utilize the effluent reuse or the recycled water and be able to have all of our equipment operate efficiently. So this was the cost to do that, and it's time and materials, and based on 2 days of work, they're making very good progress. So I do not see that any reason to exceed $12,000 for that request number 8. Horizontal installation of the submersible pumps. You will see later that this is something similar to what Commissioner Maybe was talking about. In designing the pumps in our recycled water tank, it was determined that a horizontal installation of those versus a vertical would give us more capacity to use that water that we're storing, which is approximately 28,000 gallons in that tank. This is something that you'll see in the engineering amendment that AE2S is actually I'm going to take responsibility for. Relocation of the second heater in the UV building. So when the commission approved that UV expansion in change order 3, now that we've been in actually using the facility, there were 2 heaters in the UV portion of that building. This request number 10 is actually just the cost to move one of those heaters over into that additional storage area. We have to have heat in that area. So this is primarily just the electrical cost to do that. Relocate electrical box stands on catwalk. A lot of electrical equipment, davit cranes, things of that nature on the walkway between the 2 tanks. It was determined that some of the boxes were installed that would limit the use of the davit cranes. So this was the work to relocate those to have full functionality for the davit crane. Brace the weir. City manager and I were there at the very first decant cycle for the new SBR tanks. And it became very obvious on that first decant cycle that the finger weir that actually holds the water above the UV bulbs, we don't have continuous flow through our system. So every 288 minutes, we have that decant cycle, and we average about 1,500 gallons a minute of discharge. That stainless steel weir, when the water was flowing over it, it started to vibrate. So this was to brace that. Relocate MAU and SPB. The makeup air unit in the solids processing building was originally designed to be down in the basement, and with the digesters and all the piping to move solids and fluids in that area in the basement of the old control building, it made sense for just there again having space to work and move equipment, it was a better fit in where the old boilers were at in that building. So that is the cost to move that makeup air unit from the downstairs basement up to the second floor. Fire suppression system. This was something that pertains to the fire suppression system and the generator room. Additional sprinkler heads were needed to provide adequate coverage for the backup generator, the emergency generator. Concrete restoration. If we had more of these, I'd be very happy. But in our original bid, we in AE2S took a good educated guess on concrete restoration. There again, anytime we have a rehab project and we're trying to retrofit equipment into existing buildings, it's nice to have a bid item to cover the cost for that. We estimated a little on the high side, and this is a $50,000 credit that goes back into the project funding.
Thank you.
And last but not least, while we have been experiencing heater challenges in the dewatering building, we needed to have some source of heat versus just wall plug-in milk house heater types. It made sense to revamp the natural gas heater, since that's the most efficient way of heating that building. So the temporary heat that was done back in November, and it's been able to allow us to work in that area and keep equipment from freezing until we get our air handler, which is anticipated to be delivered in early May.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Any questions from Warren? Any other questions or concerns on? Well,
I think the important thing, and excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the important thing is even with the change order and the engineering amendment, we're still sitting at $158,000 of contingency. We have substantial completion for the project slated for February 28th. And once that occurs, they're outside of the air handler for the dewatering building. There's very minor work that needs to be done to see the project to full completion, which is anticipated in mid-June. I'm very confident that we have a more than adequate amount of contingency remaining for the project.
that was my question because I calculated it and we do have 158 something. And you don't see any other major issues coming
No.
up? Because this is a pretty big change order.
This is, and unfortunately, as you can see, the bulk of it is the dewatering building. And, I give everybody my word. We tried to look at other alternatives that could be acceptable, but at the end of the day, the NFPA code to bring that facility current with the Class 1 Div 2 classification ultimately required an air handler. And for that, I feel fortunate that we had a contingency that was adequate to be able to absorb that cost, because it was something that was unexpected when we first started this project. But on the good side, every building at the facility will meet all the current codes. So that is something to be proud of.
Thank you.
There will be a change order 5. It is going to be relatively small scale, but there are a handful of items that we were working on as we were putting this one together. I do not anticipate them being any more than $25,000 to $30,000. And then we obviously have Cameron working on a solar project and putting a solar array on the roof, and have been informed USDA will not cover any of the costs for the solar project, but the SRF will, which actually 50% of the 158 remaining is USDA money, and the other 50 is SRF money. So we're hoping to be able to get a project that's somewhere in the 30 to 40 kW range for the water reclamation facility on the roof.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Why don't we open it to public comment? And if we have any more questions, Shannon, thank you very much.
Are we done with commissioner comments then?
Well, no, of
Or
course
we'll do
not.
that after.
You can. We were just asking along the way, but would you like to wait until after public comment? Okay. Any public comment?
Tricia Grabo, 204 East Calendar Street. I think this is the appropriate time for the 8th time to ask if the final figure for the $2 million appropriation from the Livingston Restoration Group has that determination been made, and is the Livingston Restoration Group going to be paying the WET for their soil preparation? I believe, Darrell, you're on that board. Has that been on the agenda of that board?
No.
It has not been on their agenda. It's a $2 million ticket.
No, not that I've read in the
They
agenda.
owe the city of Livingston $2 million. That's
So,
part of the original budget for the water treatment plant. And that was to come from Livingston Restoration Group monies.
remember that we have to wait until the project is complete. And Michael, will you,
But we're getting
State that
money, we're
again.
getting budget numbers at this point.
go ahead, Michael.
So yeah, all these numbers are the pay orders for the contractor. So this is the costs. So until we get the total costs, we haven't submitted any requests. We're waiting until we have the complete cost for the entire project.
At some point, is it possible for the city to insist that get on the agenda for the Livingston Restoration Group?
We plan to move forward with looking at this item as a potential, I don't know what word to use, grant or payback, or as part of, because of some of the problems we had with the building with, and the water and the plume, and having to mitigate that.
And the original estimate was 2 million.
Right, but it'll
So-
come in much less than that.
Because frankly, the money from the Livingston Restoration Group, is really dear, and it really needs to be paid to our city. We have 4 out of the 5 people who worked at KPRK who are dead of cancer because of that carcinogenic plume. It's a serious, serious issue, and that money was allocated to clean up the soil under the new water treatment plant. So it may come in less, but it's still $2 million. It's a lot of money. It seems like the city should attempt to go for the amount, and it needs to be on their agenda, frankly. Thank you.
Patricia. Any other public comment on resolution number 4836?
I would like to ask, how many modifications to this resolution that's currently under consideration have been approved of to date?
Can you get to that page, Faith?
This is change order 4.
This is
Change
4,
order
and then
4.
the amounts are there.
Yeah, it's on page 41 if you want to see it. 41 or 75, take your pick.
Yeah, I was using 41.
So this is the 4th change order. And there are the other 3 above that.
So the total amount of changes that the city has assumed this responsibility of is?
If you want to include all change orders for the construction and some other issues that are outside the construction, so not associated with the contractor, but other costs, it's $827,552.
How many more work changes do you assume are going to basically contemplate that the city commission is going to have to basically be asked to approve?
I would expect one more.
Yep. That's what Shannon stated right at the end.
Can somebody tell me on their what the purpose of the solar cells at this facility will accomplish? And it seems to me like we're spending a lot of money on there for something that we possibly don't require.
With the solar,
The solar.
in this change request, or change order, solar is not an issue. What
But we're going to be. I assume that that Shannon was saying that the solar is going to go in, but there's going to be no grant that will pay for it. Did I mishear?
that part of the money left in the contingency can be used for solar, but the other part cannot, is what he was saying. There's 2 different pockets or pools of money.
Okay, out of the 2 different pockets of money, how much money is this solar add-on going to cost?
Well, Jay, that's another conversation because we need to stay focused on the
Okay,
resolution.
well, then you'll see me at another conversation. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just getting estimates for that
Right.
right now. It's not.
It's still on the working through that process. So any other public comment on resolution number 4836?
Don Platic, 229 South Yellowstone. There were a few items in there, and I was having a hard time differentiating between the existing building and the new building. So if I have some of these wrong, you can ignore it. But some of the things that looked like in the new building, there were some electrical boxes that had to be moved, a catwalk that had to be, I think this is in the new building, suspended differently. There was some vibration on some water flow stuff. It seems to me that if that was in the design and it now proves to not be accurate, especially like moving the electrical boxes, they were in the way of something. Either they were designed wrong in the first place or somebody put them in wrong. And if that's the case, I don't think taxpayers should have to pay that. So I think you ought to scrutinize and find out, was an error in design or an error when someone installed it, and the taxpayers should not have to fund that.
Thank you, Don. Do you have any explanation on that?
Sure. I mean, we can look at each particular item, but some of it is really just the city's choice. It's for convenience more than anything, convenience of maintenance. It could remain
Could
as
have left it.
it could be have left as designed and it would function. We're just increasing our functionality. And most of those items we talked about are $1,600, $6,400, $3,400. They were minor costs to provide easier maintenance for our guys in the future.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I will open it back up to the commissioners. Melissa, you had.
Yeah, just having been at the wastewater treatment plant and seeing some of this stuff firsthand, I think Dan, is that his name? Dan and Shannon, they have a lot of really common sense ideas, I think, I recognize that this is an incredibly expensive project, like a quantity of money that I cannot comprehend in some regard, right? I'm not getting rich as a commissioner. But anyway, I think that a lot of these suggestions make sense in terms of efficiency, thinking about efficiency and safety, especially seeing firsthand what some of the alternatives were, like that most people wouldn't be able to see if they haven't been there, like I can't even remember the language, like meters or things that needed to be accessed by the staff that work there, like in stairwells where they'd have to put a ladder in a stairwell, accepting that doesn't make any sense, safety-wise or efficiency-wise for time. And I think one interesting thing to note was that first line item that I think it's like $35,000 for the pipes, which is expensive, but recognizing that that would all be the city would have to hire outside of city staff to work on the treatment plant in the future if that isn't corrected. So I think that it will be saving us money in the long term, and I think that Dan and Shannon actually have been thinking about this project in terms of long-term savings. And I'm happy that Kamran is on board as an energy intern. I trust that his recommendations for solar or any other energy savings for the wastewater treatment plant will be based on energy use and saving taxpayers money based on what he's told us so far. So I guess I just wanted to comment on that. And then one question, I guess this would be for Shannon and Mike. Michael Cardus. He has a name tag there. I'm going to read it. Do you expect like that the amount of money and the number of change orders that the city or that this project has undergone is reasonable for the scope of this project? Is it what you would have expected?
I'm actually super happy with the amount of changes that we've had. Most of them have been at the city's request, and most of them have been upgrades to the project. Some of the big items like more efficient blowers for the sequence batch reactors was a huge item, a huge cost item that would have worked fine with the design we were given, but it's going to save us a lot of money long-term in energy costs. So there were a few unexpected items which are going to come with any project, but to still be well within the contingency that we set out at the beginning. So to still be within the original budget for the project and have the option to do some work that we weren't sure we were going to be able to do, as far as site work, making sure that the roads are put back in a better condition than they were. Some of those things that we weren't necessarily expecting we would be able to do. I consider this to be a very successful project and to still be under budget at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair. If ever we're going to discuss something, it's very difficult to sit in this room and visualize the water treatment plant. I mean, it is unbelievable. So I've toured it 3 times already. Melissa, for the first time, went through it. Very hard to describe what's going on out there sitting in this room. And you're all welcome to go out there at any time. It's a magnificent project. This is going to take us 40, 50 years into the future and service thousands more people of the latest that there is on the market. And the cooperation between the contractor and the city and everybody involved is a fantastic effort. We have excellent people that work for the city running this project out there, some of the best in the country. Sitting here, you have no idea what we just talked about, and I apologize for that. It's just very complex. And an awful lot of time and effort spent away from it of looking at other cities and what they're doing so that we had the very most up-to-date things that we could do. So I commend everybody working on the project as far as the city and contractors, very close relationship. But I would apologize, what you just heard makes no sense to you in this room. It just doesn't, you have to go out and see what's going on. There's some places that we used to use that we're not going to use anymore, but we can use for other things. And it's a lot of decision making in this process. So I just want to commend everybody that's working on the project, but I would apologize to the general public. If you really want to see it, come on ahead. And I think one afternoon you'll understand a little bit more. So
Thank you. Any last statements?
Yeah, I just had one thing, but I read the fire suppression system change order, but I forgot that we upgraded the generator and so that required.
Right. We moved the generator inside, which then,
Yeah, we
which
moved
then
inside,
upped the,
which upped up half $2,000. But yeah, also just what Mel said, doing this project and keeping, within an existing facility and keeping the treatment plant running and during the construction has been a major feat as it is. So I'm very happy where we sit with it now too. So thank you. I yield.
Such a big project, and we know that across the country you hear about how they're running over and they're off target on time, and budgets are millions of dollars above what they, or costs are millions of dollars above the budget. I'm really proud of the city for keeping it within budget. We still have some money left, not a lot, but our request and want was that we keep it within budget, and at this time we are. So I think so far so good. So thank you. So let's move on to a motion. Do we have a motion on resolution number 4836?
I move we accept 4836.
A second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Newts. Roll call, please. Yes.
Four.
Or
Motion passes. Next resolution, we have resolution number 4837, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending the budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 by making net appropriation adjustments in the amount of $0. First time that's happened. Mr. Cardus, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is my favorite kind of budget amendment. It is for $0. what's driving this is we have transitioned to our new accounting software, and we've realized some efficiencies that we can do by changing the way we account for some of the money that comes through. So really all we're doing is we're doing a couple of things. We're eliminating a few funds where we kept some personnel costs in separate funds, specifically the retirement fund, health insurance, and some of the pension funds. We counted for those separately. We are now going to account for those all where they're spent. So not only will it be more efficient, it'll also be easier to see and a little more transparent of what actual costs are, because you'll see not only just salaries, but you'll see some of the retirement and pension costs that go along with them. So that's why it's not costing anything. All we're really doing is changing our accounting. One of the things that comes with it as well is some of our mills used to go into these accounts. So this will also adjust those mills into the proper accounts where the costs are being incurred. So the intent is just to clean up the accounting a little bit, to make it less complicated, make it easier to read, and actually be able to see where some of the costs are incurred. So you can actually see them in a department instead of having to go to a separate fund to figure out where some of the retirement costs are. Did I get that pretty right, Paige? Do you want to add anything to that? All right, great.
Right, thank you. Let's open it to public comment first. Do we have any public comment on resolution number, sorry, forgot the number, 4837? Any public comment? Okay. Any commissioner questions or comments? All right. Do we have a motion on resolution number 4837?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I make a motion we pass resolution 4837.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please. Yes?
Or
4.
Four.
Motion passes. Next resolution is resolution number 4839, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign all documents required for the AE2S Engineering Amendment Number 3 for the Livingston Wastewater Facility Professional Services Agreement with AE2S. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just the follow-on. When you do a change order for the extra work, there's also a change order for the construction management engineering that goes with it. So this is technically an amendment, engineering amendment number 3. The $158,000 we were talking about in leftover contingency already accounted for this, so that was already taken out of it. If you want to see those number again, they were the ones we looked at on page 75. So it's a $69,000 adjustment in what we are paying AE2S in engineering costs and construction management.
All right. Any public comment on resolution number 4839? Okay. Any commissioner questions, comments? All right. Do I have a motion on resolution number 4839?
make a motion to approve for resolution number 4839.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes?
Or
4.
Four.
Motion passes. Last resolution tonight is resolution number 4840, a resolution approving the ADA transition plan. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a great addition to our planning documents. So this is an ADA transition plan that lists our priorities for how we are going to make the city compatible with some of the ADA requirements. This came out of a settlement with a citizen over ADA I would say deficiencies in the downtown, which I think anybody would know that the downtown priorly was deficient when it came to ADA. Anytime you have 2 steps down off the curb, that's not compliant. But this was actually, instead of actually going to court, we did a mediation with the Department of Transportation. They actually came up with some great ideas. We now have an action plan. And what it did, and I think probably the best part of this plan, was it gave disabled citizens an advocate. We use the Active Transportation Coalition to be their advocate, so they didn't have to come to the city directly. They could go to a third party, which would then bring those concerns to the city. And they were able to give input into the order or the priority we gave to ADA projects, which makes a lot of sense. You talk to the people who need the projects to see which ones are the most important. So this plan is what came out of that. You can see a lot of the specific items if you want to leaf through it. We actually created a grievance form, so if there's other grievances from disabled citizens, they can fill out that form, explain to us what the problem is, and bring it into the city. I think on page, you can see our project, our action log. On page 86, O Street connector, wheelchair swing and parking spot in Sacagawea Park, accessible bathroom stalls in Sacagawea Park in the band shell, an accessible spot along Park Street, increased sidewalk width on Fifth Street near the railroad crossing, accessible parking spot and access to the skate park, accessible connector trail to Big Hill, accessible connector trail to Small Hill, and then accessible crossing to Katie Bunnell Park. So that's kind of our the action log of the things we want to get accomplished. This sets out a minimum expenditures per year. I think it's at 5,000. Is that right, Shannon? 15. Okay, 15,000. That will go towards this plan every year, and then we will update it and keep it current. So I think it's a really great addition to our planning documents, and I think it serves our citizens well.
Let's open it to public comment. Any public comment on resolution number 4840? All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on resolution number 4840?
I do.
Melissa?
I really like on page 80, I really like that you're going to make this information public, like this chart that you mentioned. And I was wondering, is there a mechanism for feedback that's going to be shared if the public has feedback or input? As I think, because it says that everything's going to be surveyed on an ongoing basis. So does that include the public sharing when they have input on this topic?
Absolutely. And the public can always either bring comment to the Public Works Department, or they can bring it to me directly, and we'll add it into any requirements that are in here.
And maybe that'll just be listed near where you have the
Transition plan itself,
Yeah.
like if you have feedback. Once we get it approved and posted, then we can have a feedback mechanism for it.
Thank you. And then I think I have one other question. And this might just be like a typo, or maybe I'm misunderstanding. But on page 82, under Public Works Office, it says there's no accessible parking spot in the finance office parking lot.
I think that's probably a leftover when finance used to be in Public Works, but we'll double check and make sure that's correct. This probably should be Public Works.
Thank you. Overall, I would say this is great, though. This is one of the more shocking things that when I first met Livingston as a city, I was a little bit surprised downtown. So this is great that the city's taking an active role to be more accessible to everyone.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? I guess I will just,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
just the fiscal impact, do we need to change that from 5 to 15 on page?
We currently have 10,000 budgeted.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering if it meant anything.
We're looking at spending 15,000.
Okay.
Be a net
So it's a minimum, yeah. Okay.
Right, that's just additional to what we had already had.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
I'm going to say the same thing as Melissa, in that we're moving forward pretty quickly now. I mean, it took us a long time, but with the downtown improvements and this document that was really the workings of the community and the people. And I think it's a great step and a great process that we have gone through to really help make our community more walkable and or accessible for everyone. So I think this is great. So moving forward on it, any other comments before we make a motion? All right, do we have a motion on resolution number 4840?
Move we accept resolution 4840.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Newts. Roll call, please. Yes?
Four.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next, we have 3 agenda items. We have first agenda item is to discuss, approve, deny city manager's recommendation regarding city planning board and zoning commission. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we talked about this at the end of the last meeting. Through further review, nothing has changed. Talked to the League of Cities and Towns, and they'd agreed that the current structure wasn't in compliance with what we should be having. Hopefully you saw the email that went out to the planning board a couple week and a half ago or so. It lays out the recommendation that I gave you tonight, which is to separate the planning board and the zoning commission to make them 2 separate bodies. The most efficient way to do that, I think, is the timeline that's provided in your packets, starting tonight with approving the recommendation to separate the 2. Then on the 21st, we would open a 30-day application period for both the planning board and the zoning commissions, allowing current members to apply for either. You couldn't serve on both, but they could apply to either. And hopefully they would apply to both. Well, some would apply to both so that we could spread their current knowledge across both the planning board and the zoning commission. And then the 21st to the 28th of February, the current planning board and zoning commission would operate with their current membership. So we would leave them intact through the end of February. And then in 1 March, you dissolve the membership except for the city commissioner and the county member on the planning board. And then we would close the application period on the 22nd of March. And then at the 2 April meeting, the commission would appoint the new members to both the planning board and the zoning commission. And then we'd be fully operational again at that point.
All right. Can I ask a question off of that first, if everyone's okay? So on normally members that to replace, say, exiting member from the commission or board, they interview them, go through a process, and then make a recommendation. So in this case, the commission will review the applicants and vote that night.
Yes.
And everyone understands the process, okay? All right. I think that's my only question for now. I'd like to get other commissioner comments and or public comments. Come on up if you have public comment on action item A, please.
Patricia Grabo, 204 East Calendar Street. Then will this existing planning board consider the Justin subdivision on the 20th or the 27th?
They currently have scheduled a meeting for that for the 27th.
But they are not a legal board.
It's not whether they're legal or illegal. The 2 boards aren't set up properly. So we have to change the membership of both boards. But the planning boards aren't decisional. They don't have any authority to make decisions. They only make recommendations to the commission. So all final decisions, all authority lies with the commission.
Okay, I'm going to make 2 statements. I have been involved in the city for the last 19 years. Over the course of time, there are approximately 8 decisions made by the city attorney that were incorrect. I have checked with one of the weaknesses of this city is its lack of understanding of sophisticated public process. I have checked with an attorney, Jamie Robson. I've checked with an assistant to John Tester, Jennifer Magic. I've checked with a 20-year planning person and 2 legislators I know in Washington, D.C. The consensus is if the planning board considers the Justin subdivision, that will be totally irresponsible on the city managers and the city's part, and they would be subject to prosecution. I want to make this public statement now that that is the situation. So I ask that this commission, this city manager reconsider looking at the Justin subdivision until the planning board is a thoroughly legal body. And it is a process that all subdivisions have to go through. As it stands, there are some subdivisions that this planning board has made decisions on that may in fact also be subject to questions. So this is a public statement that should this commission and should this city manager proceed with looking at the Justin subdivision, that it would be an irresponsible act on the part of the city commission and this community I cherish so much. I don't want them subject to lawsuit. Secondly, I want to make a statement that just an observation and a statement from, again, the sources I have, that the city is perfectly able to go ahead with the growth policy and impact fees at the same time, in tandem. There should be no sequence of impact fees before a growth policy. It's very simple and doable. So this is I absolutely recommend, as a citizen, as a former city commissioner, against the city moving ahead. And it will hurt nobody for them to wait. It will hurt nobody, but there is great risk in going ahead with this Justin subdivision at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I have one in that, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Actually, Patricia's got a good point, and I'll change my recommendation. I would say that tonight you zero the membership of the zoning commission, because the only problem is that you can't be both. So if you get rid of the zoning commission, the planning board's fine. They can continue to operate as a planning board, but they won't be a zoning commission. So that would cover any legal problems. We don't have to worry about it. And then I would still recommend then redoing it after the 1st of March. So that will get rid of the zoning commission. It will cease to exist. The current membership will cease to exist tonight. Planning board still stands as an independent body on its own, just as it legally should. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate
I-
that, Mr. Cardo. I also don't-
Patricia, your time is up, so can you make it quick?
very quick.
Thank you.
Still don't think that solves the problem, but thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Any other public comment on action item A? All right. Commissioners, questions or comments on action item A?
Just for transparency, the planning board's down 2 members from what it would normally be at. So that's just to be transparent, that we've brought that up at every meeting, that it will remain that way. But if everyone's able to attend the meeting, we should still be able to have a quorum. And because the issue of legality came up, I just wonder, I don't know if the city attorney has given input on this recommendation, but if you've been involved in some of the decision making, I think that would be great for us to know as a commission.
Good point. Jay?
Had many discussions between Mike and Jim. And we looked at it every way we could. Yeah, we've taken a good look at it, and I think
we
Mike's
don't-
way ahead is a very good way to move. So,
And it's the legal way.
definitely, yeah. I mean, Mike even went and talked with the city and town about what other communities are doing, and I think it's the best way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So any other thoughts, commissioners, on how to move forward in the recommendation we want to give to Mr. Cardus?
I guess the other thing I would add in terms of the particular topic for the planning board is that there's two planning board meetings scheduled in February, and there's always the chance for the public to weigh in at those meetings as well. So tomorrow night and then the 27th are two scheduled meetings. So there's opportunities for the public to weigh in on the topic.
And they're doubling up this month?
Yeah, it had to do with notice and making sure there was proper notice for this particular item on the 27th. So there's like a special extra meeting as the city saw that this issue was coming forward with the zoning and planning boards needing to be straightened out. So there's still time for public comment.
Doubling up with parks and trails? Just
Right.
Just
So
saying.
many good things to go to in Livingston.
Yes. All right. Do we want to make a motion or have a motion at this time?
Yeah, can we amend this action item? I have to make this into an affirmative too.
I would, do you mind a recommendation? I would move to accept the city manager's recommendation with the exception of disbanding the zoning commission membership effective this evening.
Okay, you got that now?
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the city manager's recommendation regarding the planning board and the zoning commission.
Say that.
Without
Amending the zoning commission being dissolved this
amending the zoning commission being dissolved. You got that, Faith?
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes?
Four.
Four.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have discuss, approve, deny public comments received regarding the City of Livingston draft strategic plan. Mr. Cardus, could you start with that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it really just comes down to you've received all of the public input that was sent to the city, either to the designated email or any other email account that input came into. We bundle it all and it's in your agenda. So it's really up to the commission what they would like to include and what they would like to exclude. And I will be happy to answer any questions on recommendations.
First, do we have any commissioner questions or comments to start? And then we'll open it to public comment. Any questions from the commission? Warren.
Basically, reading through them, there are a couple of common threads. First, the location and cost and what type of structure. Putting a special tax on residents north of the tracks. Protracted talking about things and not settling them. And one item, alternative funding for an overpass. Reading through the letters, obviously most of them came from some kind of a laundry list. Getting information from Facebook is like getting your medical diagnosis from the National Geographic. Actually, the National Enquirer, I take that back. There was a lot of misinformation presented in the letters. I I feel obviously they were all sincere. We're 13 months after the process started, and the person or persons who were wondering about why nothing got accomplished or gets accomplished, this is like the 13th hour or the 11th hour of a process. And basically, there's been no response until now. That's how you don't get things done. People should have been involved from the very beginning. People who put stuff on Facebook should also put positive recommendations at the beginning of a process, not just at the very end. I would like to hear what the folks who are here tonight have to say. I have a pretty good idea from reading the letters. I wish all of your wishes had been known a year ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Any other updates or questions, comments?
I'm comfortable with the strategic plan as we have written. We need to remember that this is not a binding document whatsoever. This is just a guideline looking to the future and how to direct the staff to do it. No decision's been made on where, how any over underpass is going to be made, but this is just a way forward. I read all your letters. Thank you. I really did. And twice, I think I've gone through them. And I appreciate the input. And I'll echo Warren's sentiments as well. It's a process, and we're not done with it. There'll be plenty of public hearings when we get closer to establishing where the next crossing should be. And also, we're trying to look towards the future, not not a year out or 2 years out, but our growth is on the north side, and it's the north end of town. So that's something to keep in mind. But there again, remember, this is not a binding document. That's just a way forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I made a statement a few weeks ago. The strategic plan is a strategic plan of staffing, according to the city manager. The growth policy is a separate item. I don't think the strategic plan was made to answer those questions. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I saw the strategic plan. It's a staffing mechanism. Now, all the letters and everything that came in, which are very valuable, we're not in the growth policy. That's what came out of it with me. If you're hitting the underpass, overpass, we haven't gotten close to talking about that. We did several years ago when I first started. So if I might be wrong, but the strategic plan and the growth policy, to me, are two separate items. And the comments made by the public are excellent. But that's not what the strategic plan was. I think it was somebody was jumping the gun on how this looked. So both are critical things, the strategic plan and the growth policy. So, I mean, that's what hit my brain. I don't know if I'm on the right side or not, but I don't think when our city manager made up the strategic plan was answering all the growth policy. We didn't talk about that. Where the underpass is going to be, where an overpass might be. And I used to live on the north side in 1998 when I first moved here, and I moved out. I'm across the tracks. And the comments are, right on with some of the people. This is a tough area and not an easy thing, but I have in my mind separation between strategic and growth. So I yield.
Thank you, Mel. Any other comments, Melissa?
Yeah, there was one word that stood out in the that I forgot to bring up the last time we talked about the strategic plan, and that's under the goals under infrastructure. So that's point 3 under I'm on page 3 of the strategic plan, if that's helpful. I think it's repeated when you get into it's all restated as the goals are outlined. But it says that, and I just wanted to get clarification, like Warren said, this has been going on for a long time. And so you might have already had this conversation. So this is just me getting up to speed or suggesting that we consider another word. So it says build and maintain infrastructure now into the future that drives growth in a strategic and responsible manner. I wonder if that intent of that statement is that infrastructure is supposed to drive growth. That's how I'm reading it.
Kind of went back and forth on that a little.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's if that's what you mean, is that infrastructure is trying to drive growth or just guides.
Yeah.
Okay.
And have the infrastructure in place for where.
So supports growth or guides growth.
in these areas.
I just feel like drives is kind of a loaded word. Like there's some implications I feel like with drives. Yeah. And I don't know if that's the intent or not. So I just wanted to get clarification from the commission on if that word is appropriate or if it would be better as something else.
So I think we need to plan now as to how our conversation tonight,
Mm-hmm.
because according to our plan or our action item,
Mm-hmm.
we are discussing the strategic plan and the comments and how
Okay.
we move forward.
Sure.
I think that's a really good point. I see us changing that word to guide or something similar in retrospect. But I want to make sure that we're staying focused on the intent tonight, because at this time, we do not have on the agenda, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the commission or Michael, that we are going to accept the strategic plan as is, correct? That's not on the agenda,
Not unless you decide to move so.
unless we wanted to move that forward somehow within tonight's decisions or conversation. So are you okay with that,
Yeah,
Melissa,
absolutely.
to add
That's fair.
having more time to make sure we can talk through those issues
Yeah. Can I,
or those points?
yeah, in regards to public comment, there was some interest in energy topics.
Mhm.
We did get a few comments regarding that, and Comron offered to come here. He has some more measurable points that could be included, building off of the conversations we've already had. I wonder if we'd be able to make some time for him to share his
Yeah.
suggestions as the intern, or if
So-
you'd rather have that at a different meeting.
I feel like we need to move forward somehow, but I do want to make sure we stay focused on this first part of the strategic plan, which is to, in regards to the letters, or the public comment received, and then move forward as to, what we want to do to finish up on the strategic plan and making sure that the public has their time to express their concerns or thoughts. I do want to just, before we move on to public comment, I would like to address what the other commissioner said. I see this as just a working, changing, very fluid document that we have now put in place. I mean, this is the first time that we've had a strategic plan as a community, as a city, and that we decided as a community within the strategic plan discussions that these are our priorities. So when you go to the third section, what do we find important? What do we want to see us working on in the future. And my concern from a lot of the feedback that we received on this was really directed to obviously the crossing. But I feel like the feedback, so a lot of it, and I'm asking people honestly daily right now, do they want to remove, because in our state or in our letters, a lot of people are saying take it out of the strategic plan. And my worry as a commissioner who has worked for 5 years as this is the number one issue I feel the community has wanted us to work on, and that is a crossing. I'm worried that from the statements that and the letters that we received that people want us to remove it. So if we remove it out of the strategic plan, that means our staff stops working on it. Because, and a lot of the reasonings for it that they want it removed are that they don't want it in a certain location. They don't want it taxed a certain way, or us to be taxed as a community a certain way. Or they want an overpass versus an underpass. But in this strategic plan, it's a straightforward question. Do we want as a commission and a city to move forward on figuring out a solution for this problem? Yes or no? And I've been asking multiple people that. And often the answer sometimes is, well, tell me more about where it may be, and they want to know. And I say, there's some proposals, there's some ideas. We have this already. We have this property. We have this, these ideas, whatever. And I'll try to lay out, here's some taxing options. And I always use that word. So I guess I feel like I don't want to take it out because I don't want to stop this process. But there's this other group of people that have asked us to, and I want to make sure that we understand their reasoning and if they're really willing for us to take it out for good. Because I don't want to. I'm not willing to. But if the community really wants it, I guess it's what it is. So I just wanted to state that for myself as a commissioner, but I would like to also open it up to the commission or to the public on the strategic plan and just a few thoughts or your basic thoughts on how, really our question tonight is what are we doing with the public comments? Do we want to add them in? Do we want to keep them? I think we will keep them. If, it's obvious that they're part of this process, we should have them as part of the document. But I'd love to hear feedback on just your concerns or thoughts on the strategic plan in general before we can move forward. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another growth policy.
No, and it's also not a plan telling you that you will be taxed $500 extra a month, because there's nothing in here that says that. Other than some thoughts or some possibilities for how we fund forward some of the major projects, including staff time, things like that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
the one thing that struck me with the letters, and I think there were two key points. I don't want to be charged back because I live on the North Hill. I don't like where you're talking about putting it. So, or is it none of the above? I mean, you don't want anything. So this is a hard thing to separate. I got the cost part. And that's a tough issue because we all go over the other side of the tracks, soccer games, so on and so forth. But I was trying to get I don't like where you're thinking about putting it. Number one, I don't want you to charge me. If you're going to put it there, I don't like the charge. Or none of the above, so I didn't learn that from a lot of the letters. And this is just a random thought after living in Livingston for a number of years. Where is a good place to put it? I asked this question when I was on a commission and I first got here. It was originally planned to come out where Dr. Voinovich's ranch was on Route 10. So I'm at Route 10, but then I work in Livingston and I got my kids in school. So I got to go out there and I got to double back. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this thing. So this is why we need a lot of input from the community. And these are crucial questions. You know, where is a good spot? Then the overpass came in, and we costed the overpass when I first came on the commission. Contrary to popular belief, it was a little bit more expensive than the underpass. But when I looked at where they wanted to put the overpass, which had been out in the Northern Lights, I've got this beautiful view of the mountains, and I'm going to have an overpass. It's going to be facing me. I got to look at that every day. So it's going to take a lot of discussion. And is there a great answer? Boy, I'm looking for it. We have to do something for our traffic. And there's a couple of things coming with synchronized lights, which are going to be very important. Redesign of some of the intersections. That's very important. So, but it's going to be part of a grand discussion at some other point. I don't think what the strategic plan was. We weren't talking about that. So get ready for the next round.
So let's open it up to public comment on our strategic plan and moving forward. Please say your name and
Good evening, Federico Bonatesta, 15 Buffalo Jump Road. So I sent you my comments and I'll try to give you something different tonight because I heard the discussion. And, you know, I've done this for a living for a long time, approving projects and strategies. And I think some of the comments you make really refers to, is it a good project or a bad project? It depends on what the city wants to be. You need to have the growth plan before having an implementation strategy. You cannot work the other way around. Is Livingston going to see a city where there's no cars? Is Livingston going to build the biggest casino in Montana? Or only nice restaurants? That drives the decision you make about these kind of projects. You cannot start from the project and say, well, it's either here or there. It depends. You know, if one costs $25 million, how are you going to pay for it? And the other is $2 million. They're a trade-off. What is the trade-off? And a lot of the people I talk to are confused because they don't understand the growth plan. There is no growth plan, which is what we discussed last year about downtown. So this city needs to have a growth plan that drives decision. Once you have a growth plan, once you understand what we say, well, this is the kind of town we want to live in, decision becomes much easier. Because if you have a huge development, you need a bigger pass. If you have a small development, people will say, well, I want to pay $1,000 extra tax a year. I'm going to wait 5 minutes at the traffic light. So they're all trade-offs. But if you don't have a strategy, you cannot take decision in a void. It's like going to an architect and say, build me a house. What house? Where? You know, and the architect doesn't know, cannot take that decision for you. And this is very worrying when it comes about the consultant for the growth plan. Consultants are very narrow expertise. They only do one thing and everything becomes a nail with a hammer. And so the city needs to tell the consultant what kind of plan, and the consultant execute the paperwork, the detail. But the city needs to drive that discussions. I don't know, there must be a fetish about traffic studies because I've seen the North Side development. I saw another traffic study with 4 numbers put there on cost that are meaningless. They say, well, it could be a growth of 3,000 people or 600. Well, it's a big difference. We don't need a traffic study now. We need a growth plan. That will drive decisions. You know, there's a sentence in the organizational development strategy, which is a good thing to have. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's great to have a piece of paper that says, this is what we're going to focus on. But it cannot be on one line. It says hiring an IT person and the second development 20 million swimming pool project. They're not in the same document. They're 2 completely different things. One drives about future project. One is about the next month. And so this is, I think, the misunderstanding that is the growth plan needs to happen first and drive decision-making. It creates a framework. In that framework, then we'll take the right decision. once we agree what the framework is. And there's a cost. All of this traffic study for the north side, there's no cost associated to it. I mean, 25 millions or 2 millions is a huge difference. So I think, and this is why everyone is confused. They ask me the same, just because of the job. They ask me the same questions. Have you heard about this? What is going to happen? When is this taking places? And the absence of context creates the confusion. I don't know what comments you got from Facebook, but I give most of that because people don't know. They don't have framework. And there's a sentence in the development strategy that says, the organizational strategy will be the foundation document that drives the growth policy. It's actually the other way around. The growth policy that drives what kind of organization you put in place to implement it. Thanks.
Thank you, Federico. So I don't know if you know this, Federico, but we did put the growth policy in the plan or in the strategic plan. So the work, if approved, will sort of be working together to complete a growth policy without losing sight and time of the railroad crossing because of our time limit. So they're moving together. So I don't know if you knew that the growth policy and the plan that it was added in at the last discussion.
I saw that growth policy in the organizational strategy, but that needs to happen first before any big development decision. Because what if then, after working 6 months on the growth policy, we found that the rail crossing is in the wrong place because we're not going to do that project? Or what is actually is better to have another investment somewhere else or limited funds? $25 million for an underpass for a private citizen it's a humongous cost. I mean, over a 20-year period, you need like $60 million in revenue to pick back in actual money the cost of that project. So, and I haven't seen a single number anywhere. So that is the concern. I've seen a traffic study, and I've seen 4 PowerPoints with 2 numbers that financially don't make much sense. And that is the concern people have. And so it's okay to drive probably in parallel. We all do that. I mean, that's real life. But there has to be a bottleneck where a growth policy determines what happens next rather than the other way around. Otherwise, we're going to build something and then we're going to say, well, actually, the city is going in a different direction. Is it in the wrong place and it costs too much? Or is the right type? I mean, that is the concern.
Yep. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Federico, have you read the growth policy?
I've seen an old document. I haven't seen anything online that is more recent than a couple of years back.
Yeah, 2017, right?
Yeah. I mean, and there was no match in terms of where Livingston want to go as a city. As a very general statement. We're going to move in a strategic manner, fiscally responsible, etc. But there is no vision. I mean, Big Sky has a very clear plan. Building has a very clear plan. Bothman, you go on their website and you see this is the city today. I mean, a strategy is going from A to B. This is where we are, strengths and weaknesses. This is where we want to be with a very clear plan. And the strategy is only, this is what we put in place to go from A to B. It's as simple as that. Now, then only at that point, you have your organizational plan that tells you, given my strategy, this is how we source it. But that comes at the end. I sent you, I think so, there was a nice picture of a city with development. And, and we're talking about the 4th quadrant. And we haven't done the first 3, or not clearly, or people don't understand it or don't know them. So we should focus on the first 3 and then go to execution. I understand not for everything. I mean, and we have a great project now, the water treatment plant. How does it fit with the strategy? Nobody knows. You ask anyone, nobody will be able to tell you. And the same for other projects.
Thank you. Michael, do you have any clarifications or any thoughts?
No, I mean, really that choice is then to just shelve the strategic plan for a year. Is that the recommendation? I mean, I guess I didn't get the recommendation.
My recommendation is there are some things in the strategic plan which are short terms and which you need for your organizational. And that's great. Hiring some people and that kind of things. Completely separate is big projects like the swimming pool, which I don't even know what the $20 million. I saw just the mark, and then other items that the rail pass, etc. So I would say we should really focus in the short term on a growth plan to understand where Livingston is going to be like, and that will drive then the decision for the bigger item spend. And you have so many good projects, like the park renovation we did last year, the downtown, the water plant. What else? How do everything fits together? And the Park County has done something similar. So how does it fit? What will Livingston be in 15 years? I don't think nobody has a picture of that.
Right. And that's why we're going to move forward with a growth policy.
Right. And I think that's really the priority, though.
Sure.
Yeah,
I guess the
and-
only downside to that is the $1 million, right? Like if we don't start on the crossing now, we owe $1 million.
Well, and moving it forward and the conversations, and it's not like tomorrow we have a decision that it's going to look a certain way, that kind of thing.
But I
Thank
think
you.
people don't understand the timelines and what is involved, and that's why you get all these $100 million.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Any other public comment?
Patricia Grabo, 204 East Calendar Street. I could not add much more than to what Federico said. I read his letter. I think it makes all kinds of sense to start with where we are and where we want to go, which is the growth policy. I just want to underscore that. I have not read all the letters. I've read some of them. Is the public able to see these letters at all?
Well, they're in the agenda.
Okay. Okay, then I will let people know that they can look over these letters and see what the public actually had to say. I want to say one other thing. I'd like to get a transcript of commissioner comments because I think so many of you gave a great deal of respect to the public that takes the time and the effort to make comment when asked to do so. This was a chance for public comment, and the deadline was extended until the 12th of February. Thank you very much, Commissioner Newts, and your comments on that. I think the public really appreciated the fact that it was allowed a chance to make comment, and it responded very well, I think. I think we have an intelligent community. I think we have adults who truly are interested in the well-being of the community. I have never seen them respond as much as they have. We want them to respond. We don't want to write a letter back to them and criticize their comments. We just are so grateful that the public is willing to take the time and effort to participate in their government. So they responded to a deadline for public comment. That's what they did. And so I think among those I've been discussing things with, their number one priority is that growth policy. Please, first. And I will just underscore what Federico said when he made his comments to you as well. Let's find out where we are. Let's find out as a community where we want to go. And let's work together. Let's not create any kind of adversarial anything. Let's get together and find a lot of joy in finding out what this community really is and what people have to say. I thank them so much for participating in their government. I haven't seen that for a long time, and I've been coming to these meetings religiously. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Kelsey Kenfield, 125 South G Street. Yeah, the only reaction I had tonight, I came to listen to your response. It feels like you feel very defensive against the input that we've given. We didn't do it soon enough. We're talking about the wrong things. I think that it's just really important for all of us to have a chance to contribute our ideas and not feel that they're going to be set aside because they make you uncomfortable. My comments are already in the letter, so I won't go over those. But please don't be defensive if we bring up things that are difficult to talk about, that make you uncomfortable, that seem like we're accusing you. I don't think anybody means to accuse you of anything, but I do believe that there's a real concern in this town about, let's see, I was listening to the governor of Ohio yesterday talking about this, the emergency of President Trump. And he was saying we need to move from a shareholder mentality to a stakeholder mentality. And I think that's really important here because people around Livingston are very concerned about the gentrification of the town and it losing its appeal, its unique characteristics. So I think we're all just trying to give you our input and our emotions and our feelings. So please don't get defensive about it. We're just trying to give you our ideas. Even if it's at the last minute, we were given the opportunity. So that's what we'd like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Hi, Carrie Yeager, 1205 Mule Haven Drive. I just wanted to comment on that maybe I wrote a letter, but if I had my information not correct, I apologize. But at the same time, when you're asked for comments, and it's available. So I did make a comment. If I misunderstood it, I apologize. But at the same time, if I did not say something, I can't say, now, and if it did matter down the road, because I didn't make a comment and let my opinions be known, then I wouldn't feel like I have a right to complain when things got changed. And Terrell Hoagland, when you talk about if we want to remove it from the altogether off of the plan, because it did when I read over it, the way I did read it was it said that it didn't say there was options for an underpass. It said that we're looking at the ones. It talked about the specific one at PFL Way. And that's why I was compelled to say I needed to say something, that this isn't the plan that I see moving forward, and that we do need a underpass, an additional way to get across the tracks. And I think I wrote that I feel like we're being held hostage over on the north side because we can't get across and do what we need to do. But the idea is the problem that we're trying to solve is that we're stuck over there. We feel like the access is limited, and to get across the tracks to the other side of town and get across town is beyond frustrating. And that's what we need to fix. But definitely by us, the idea of a under overpass 2 miles from town isn't going to help us any, is what's frustrating. And so I don't want to say we don't need another underpass. We need us Northside residents need to be able to get across town without a total hassle being backed up on every throughway that we currently have. And that's all.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
So can I just ask, you had said, I want to make sure I understand. So according to the strategic plan, you thought that it states, or you read that it states, where did you see it in the strategic plan? I just want to, because I don't want to miss something.
The way I read it in we have with the time that you were gonna, this is where it's at on the priority. We want to start working on like a grid.
Like this part of the essentials. And so you're saying that your concern
was that it talked about the PFL Way
Okay,
pass.
okay.
Not even mentioned, or just mentions railroad crossing, period.
And then,
Okay.
it,
And, not where.
yeah, but it's,
Okay.
you know, the 17.5 and this 3.6 is going to come from north side and 6 from other side. That's where, yeah.
So
Well,
the
but
resources.
that's what you were
potential-
looking at. So I was
Okay.
like, that's where
Okay.
we were heading in the plan. And that's the way I read it, is that that's where we're looking.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that helps
Sorry.
me to understand. So,
So I felt like, I'm like, maybe I don't
Your
understand.
letter was clear too.
Sorry. Thank
yes,
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Any other public comment? Come on up. No other public comment? All right, so moving on with the commissioners. How do we want to move forward on the strategic plan? We will need to, at some point, make a motion to accept the strategic plan and then also finalize any of the corrections or, additions or things that because we have worked through it over the months. I'm trying to remember how long, but I do feel we're close, but are we close enough to make a decision on a strategic plan or move it on to another, to the next agenda for final vote? Just some thoughts on it. And making sure that we're taking in all the information from various feedback that we've been receiving. What do you think? Give me some feedback.
I would like to see it on the final draft at the next meeting. I don't know if that's possible. If we need to have a work session before that,
Michael, what's your
to-
thought on it?
spend an hour on it.
It just depends what changes you guys want.
Right.
That's it.
And we need to see them before. Well,
What are your thoughts of when those suggestions for changes would be?
well, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
at a
It
work
needs to be
session?
Before the next meeting, so we need a work session. Correct? Or do we even need that?
Well, can we have, and I don't know if this is
But at some point. yeah,
acceptable when it comes to Montana law or how we go through the process. Any of the changes that we've had in addition, can we have them somehow highlighted as changes and then accepting those changes? And then have a discussion at the next meeting as accepting the document as is or accepting document with changes? Could we do that?
I'm not sure. Not sure what,
We're talking about changing a word here in a
Yeah.
paragraph.
Or
and stuff
I
like
guess,
that.
adding
guess
in
the
any-
question would be, what changes do you want in the document?
Right, that's, so as we add in all the ones we have had, we've added in through
I
public comments.
think those are
and-
already in there.
Okay, and then any additionals? I know, Melissa, you had some to think about today. I'm just wondering, do we have to go through the process of discussion today to get it back into the document or into it? Do we wait
Well, I think
a
the,
work session?
so the process now is the majority has to decide what wants to be changed. So you're going to need some form of meeting, right? Like it's going to be, you've already received, I guess, the other way you could do it is you could ask me to provide a different recommendation and I could write the changes and then provide that to you.
And then-
Unless you wanted to do it yourselves. So that's kind of the spot we're in, is who do you want to do the changes based on what?
Well, then would we have the vote on the document at that time? So it gives us 2 weeks to put in changes that have all been in public meetings, address any of the other concerns or anything related to information that we've received from the start to the end, and then and have those changes maybe highlighted just to show that, I'm just wondering what's the step? Can we bypass another scheduled meeting and just have it with changes applied and then make the vote on the changes as well as the strategic plan at the first meeting.
Sure, because whatever is presented to you at the time would be the draft, and you could accept it or amend it. The real question is, who decides what changes get put in?
That's the thing, we're going over semantics and a lot of this changing words and stuff, at some point we've got to say, when are you going to just keep doing this? And doing
Right,
this,
right.
Just,
Can we do that at the next meeting, or do we do it at a work session? Everyone, what's your thoughts?
Work session.
Which is the what? Do we do what at
The
next?
changes
Like we have the conversation about the changes we want
Yeah.
to be in there.
and we have to discuss how we want to apply the letters, if they want to be just part of the document.
Yeah.
Like an appendix kind of thing, or, which I think they should be, I'm just saying it. And then, or have a work session to go through all the final draft or the final draft to then come to us as a recommendation, or do we do it at the next meeting as one of the agenda items?
all depends how soon you want to get it done.
Well, I want to have this done by the next meeting
Me too.
and
Work
voted
session.
on.
It sounds like we can do it at the next meeting though, right? We can do it at the next meeting and then,
I think so. I mean, if there's not a lot of changes, we have to have public,
But when are we going to
input.
discuss, you're going to call Michael and ask for a change here, or how
no,
do
you're
we
saying,
approve it?
were you suggesting we make the suggestions at the next meeting and then vote on it based on,
I would say we put them into the document as potential changes, any changes that we have from public input and from,
Yeah, I'd like to
Commissioner
see a final
comments,
document
and then
after
have
the
the
meeting.
final
oh,
document
so
to,
two more.
I think that may be difficult because you have some contradictory competing input. So you can't put both changes in.
example.
Some people want the railroad crossing taken out, other people don't. So you can't put both of those changes in.
So
I'm
we
confused.
have
Which
to
one?
have a working session then to make sure.
I can either draft the changes. You can draft the changes as a commission together in a work session. But that's going to take at least 2 meetings, maybe 3, which there's no driving force to get this completed other than finalizing what we're working on. I mean, it's not like we're not doing any of the work. We're still continuing.
So we can just do it at regular commission meetings.
I would,
Is what you're saying?
Michael, I would prefer that, but. what are
Okay.
your Thoughts, any
Yeah.
other commissioners?
I sat in a class, a government class on growth policy about 7, 8 years ago, with a facilitator and all the people from the community that wanted to come. And that person and the people that are there start putting stuff on a board. And from that, we develop and that's a growth policy.
Well, that's how we
Um,
did this.
Well, we did that with help.
Well, no, what you could put in here, and we even haven't had a meeting about growth policy. We've not even gotten close to it. What I'm saying, so you can put it into the strategic plan at some point. X, Y, Z on a particular day, we're going to have a meeting. The growth policy starts because we haven't gotten into it. I mean, I hate to be.
So are you saying we need to move forward and get
We
this
got-
moving?
We got to get this
and
moving.
set the strategic
Yeah, let's
plan
get
so
this
that we
moving.
can
Yeah.
move-
And you want the
Other
public.
work forward even
There's
more.
somebody that's gets knowledgeable in the public. And then we get into nuts and bolts. And what we visit each part of town where we got the growth, you just laid the whole thing out. So, I mean, this is what I see, but which could be in here, but it's something we got to address.
So can we get the strategic plan for action item next agenda? with, am I correct in saying with the changes and
To
or
make changes, right? To
the
bring
changes that have already been there or put in? The,
changes. I don't even know
and
what's
any
been changed.
potential changes that we can discuss with public feedback at the next meeting for a motion to approve or deny. Would we be okay with that?
I would like to see a work session because um, a lot of these items have to be discussed. It's not like we're just going to take everyone that came in and plug it in. I think that, and then that has to, obviously has to come up for approval, but I don't see making all those decisions in a regular commission meeting.
But the thing is, I'm still unclear what changes we're making. That's,
Well, some of them are just verbiage,
you're right, yeah.
which is fine. I'm not
Right.
putting that down. PCEC put in suggestions for changing a number of items.
Right.
And that should be discussed, and I think it should all be hashed out before the next regular commission meeting.
So we have 1 week.
So,
We have a week. So we'd have to have it the 26th, and then if it's at the first commission meeting, or do we move the strategic plan to the 19th? And then have a little more time.
We have to move.
In
to the
March.
19th then.
Then it gives us 2 weeks of time without a meeting, like without a, we can have,
Acting on it.
yeah. I feel like we could do either, Warren, but I would support having a work session and strategic planning session, or that we have a meeting where we do a bit of that work during the commission meeting.
Because it sounds like we need to go line by line again, all
Right.
through this.
right.
And at some point, we have to make a decision. Yes, we're, how many times are we rewrite this? We've been working on it for 12, 14 months now. And then some, it's not a perfect document, but there again, it's not a binding document also as well, as far as I'm concerned. Correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong on that, but
So, and I guess one thing I'd like to bring up is that we don't get too far down into the weeds into the execution, because a lot of that is just basically my management style, right? Like how we set up things, how we do things. Big projects obviously that's a different story, but some of this is just,
want to change a mission statement and stuff like that, and I'm all for it. I worked on it once. I'm happy with it, but if you need change words, go for it.
We worked on it.
I know, let's move forward
Six-
now at some
six
point.
different major meetings, but.
It sounds like we're all in agreement that we want to talk about it as a commission as opposed to getting an edited draft from the city manager. So it sounds like we're in agreement that we want to have the discussion about edits, right? So just doing some reflective listening here. That was one thing that was brought up as an alternative. So it sounds like that we want to have a discussion. So the question is, do we want a work session or do we want to just do it at a commission meeting?
Warren is proposing to do a work session. I said that I would do either. I'm open to and supportive of either. I think we could get the work done during, as an action item. But I also would love to work at one more meeting of just really getting to the meat of it, even though I could go either way.
I mean, I can't see more than an hour spending on this, in a work session. I mean,
What do we?
I don't know. People want to make changes in the verbiage and stuff like this. When do we do that?
This and the whole thing, or just the?
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
I thought we were
Making
just
sure
on
that
the,
the priorities are, the community, when it comes to their top priorities, along with the commission priorities, are we in the right, is our list important, or what we want as a community and as a commission? And the city has made this list based on our feedback. And our feedback comes from the community. So we do want to make sure this part is clear.
And I think maybe the first question you might want to answer is, do we want to proceed before we finish the growth policy? Right, because all the other questions are moot if that's the answer is no.
I want to go forward with this.
I think the point about the growth policy wasn't necessarily just the strategic plan, but it was thinking about the projects within the strategic plan. And is it appropriate to have a couple of those items in the strategic plan before growth policy, before we have a robust, updated growth policy? And so I think for me, the question is, especially the crossing, this is up to the community at this point, right? Does the community, because there's a timeline, and maybe we need to hear that timeline again of when the city would owe money back. So the city is in a position, the community, not us and the staff, but all of us that live here are in a position where we have to think about paying back $1 million if we want to wait for a growth policy. Maybe that's what people want. Maybe people would rather have $1 million of debt and wait for a growth policy. I don't know. I think I don't know the answer, but I think that's, it's not just about the strategic plan. I think it's specific things in the strategic plan. The suggestion is to wait for a growth policy. But then we got just as many comments, I think, that say, we're really happy the growth policy's in there. Keep moving forward with that. So those are the conversations. I don't know that anybody said stop the strategic plan and completely. Like that there's plenty of things in there that are fine to move forward with. Was kind of what I heard.
Okay, so
So can we hear a timeline of that? Just not because we're making a decision on it now, but just for public record and transparency. When are we in a position where we either have to break ground on a project or start thinking about where the money's going to come from to pay back?
If we don't have a resolution for inclusion on the ballot by 12 August, we will be paying back $1 million.
And that money will come from,
We can double street assessments for a year. We can take a loan and pay it out of increased street assessments. We can pass a mill levy to pay it back. Those would be the main ways to do it.
so effectively our growth policy would cost the whatever, $60,000, $80,000, whatever the bid comes in at. Plus, if we waited, plus whatever this funding is that we're paying now to pay back this money that we owe for a project that wasn't started. I just want to make that clear that that's kind of the position our community is in. All of us, not just us, but all of us. That's what's on my mind when I think about, it's not just the strategic plan, it's specific items.
So I appreciate all your comments. We need to, at this time, just decide, because I think they work together, right? There are multiple pieces in the puzzle that we have to be working on at the same time. And we know that we need to decide on the strategic plan, which is part of it's going to be working in, it's moving forward no matter what. We know that because the normal work, everyday work of the city has to include a lot of what is in here. So should we just have a work session that then addresses the final draft and make this a final draft to bring to a vote at the next meeting? Then we can discuss and clarify all the timelines, everything at that time as far as related to the strategic plan. Should we do it? Okay, because I think we're starting to spin a little bit and we just need to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, Okay.
That's what I'm waiting
So we're going to work to plan a meeting to,
notice do you need?
we could have it next week.
We could have it next week.
Because of
Thursday.
our line. We have the 26th. We often meet on Tuesdays, just in continuation of sort of our timing with commission meetings, unless the 26th doesn't work. Would that work for people?
Works for me.
It does not for me.
Does not. Okay, let's look at. We have board meetings on the 27th. What other days, you guys, as far as
What about Thursday on the 28th?
28th?
What are we doing on that day? We're at the planning board thing, or what are we doing?
Planning board's on Wednesday, the 27th.
That you mentioned we're doing something on the 28th.
I don't think so. That's just it'd be the last day of the planning board's operation.
Somebody's gonna have-
Oh, and there's the public hearing for the grant.
Oh, yeah, we have to be here at 5:30 for that.
We don't have to be here.
You don't necessarily have to be, but
we
if
don't.
you wanted to combine it with this, that would be fine. If you wanted to open up with a public hearing and then go on with a work session, that would be fine.
Friday.
On Thursday, the 28th.
Right.
How's that, everyone?
Mhm.
So we're gonna have a work session and a public hearing. Start with public hearing,
Start with public hearing.
and
5:30.
have a work session starting at 5:30. 5 or 5:30? 5,
What day is
30.
this we're talking about?
the 28th.
Thursday.
5:30.
And what time were we figuring this?
5:30 or later.
5:30.
5:30 works good for me.
Darrell, can you clarify how a work session is different from a regular meeting? Like in terms of
We,
things people might be expecting that would be different,
it's
like public
generally
input?
public input, because it is an open meeting. It continues to be similar to this with less structure. That's the best way to state where we'll have a kind of a norm for the night, which is typical just for communicating concepts and ideas from the public and from the commission. But there's less of the motions and the rules and of order. So
Thank you.
The major difference on that is there will be no motions because
Right.
you can't make
Can't
any
make
decisions.
any.
So the public hearing will be a separate part because that will be you'll vote on that. And then once that's done, you'd open up a work session. And the work session, there would be no votes. So the way it usually works is it's your chance as a commission to work together to provide me guidance to what I come back with for the draft. So we just kind of go with consensus, then I add that in. And then once I bring it back to you in the commission meeting, that's when the actual vote would take place to accept it. So it's just a matter of no decisions can be made in a work session.
And then the public can give input at what point in the work session, or do they wait until the commission meeting? I just, for
No,
transparency.
They
and clarity.
you have public comment.
At both.
Yep, at both.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you okay with that day? We didn't ask.
I think so.
We're here.
He'll be here. He has to be here anyway.
All right. So we have a meeting on the 28th at 5:30 for the public hearing and a work session on the
Immediately following.
immediately following on the strategic plan and final edits and public comment. Okay. All right. So moving on to our next action item, we have action item C, to discuss, approve, deny CPACE letter of support to Montana legislature. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this was requested by the commission last meeting to provide a draft letter working with the organization that requested it. We've drafted that up for you. You should find that on page 171. And that is there for your review and or approval.
Do we have any public comment on the draft letter to the Montana State Legislature?
Patricia Grabo, 204 East Calendar Street. Public comment on a draft letter for CPACE is really important to our downtown buildings. I know the Grabo is a pretty large building in downtown Livingston, and we are very interested in going solar. And CPACE allows us to do that. We are really encouraging the commission. So many of our downtown building owners and businesses are interested in the possibility of solar energy for our buildings. So we certainly would support any kind of letter that you would give in support of this project. It's a pretty significant project.
Thank you, Patricia. Any other public comment? All right, commissioners, any comments or questions on the letter?
Looks good to me.
Anything? So I guess, do we have an motion on the letter, the CPACE letter to the state legislature?
Make a motion to approve action item C regarding CPACE letter of support.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please. Yes,
Four.
Four.
Yes.
motion passes. Mr. Cardus.
It's past 2 hour mark, so I will forego my comments for the evening.
So structured.
I just wanted to thank everyone that came and participated tonight, and all of the compassionate and passionate comments we got regarding the strategic plan. I also just wanted to clarify that something was brought up tonight in public comment that I have asked at a previous meeting, that the growth policy is not being delayed due to impact fee studies. It strictly has to do with financing, and that we've already discussed how both can move forward at the same time once the growth policy is funded. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Warren?
I just wanted to clear up what obviously was a major misunderstanding, and pretty much everybody concerned is now gone. But when I said about the last minute attendance, that had nothing to do with not wanting feedback or being defensive. I'm one of the last ones that doesn't want to hear from the understanding what I said. The main gist of what I said was that it winds up being a speed bump instead of following the process all the way from the beginning 13 months ago and contributing, not being defensive or shut out. Now we have a speed bump. That was the point of my statement, not wanting to hear from the people of Livingston.
Thank you, Warren. Mel?
Thank everybody for coming tonight. We learn things every day, so appreciate people coming. I missed the last meeting, so I wasn't prepared for I didn't catch up with the comment part of things. So when I said, oh my God, but this is how you learn. good and bad, but I think we're on the right trail. And the next big one will be the growth policy, where everybody will have a shot at that. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mel.
I would like to propose getting the Active Transportation Coalition on next meeting's agenda under its scheduled public comment regarding the downtown design modifications and stuff like that.
Working group.
Yeah, the working group. Since we do have the ATC already, do we need to have another working group or regarding this? They've done so much work on it already, and they're willing to hold public hearings and gather public comments and stuff like that. So I'd really like to get a second on that, because I'd like to see what they could propose regarding this issue of our downtown streetscape.
This is
Put a second on, I'll give it a second. So I want to be clear as to what you're asking to put on the agenda, that we add to the agenda an action item that addresses the makeup of and the potential for ATC, or the Active Transportation Coalition, to be involved in the working group and the advisory group that will be discussing.
Do we still need to form that, or do we?
Well, and Michael, we have it on the next agenda as well. You have part of it proposed.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways we could do it. If the ATC has a different proposal, we could let them present in public comment and then have an action item just related to that. And then if you still want a different solution from that point forward, then I could just present at the next meeting. I probably wouldn't present both in the same meeting. So I would let them present at the next meeting, and then I can just present what I have at the next meeting if we decide to go that way.
So put them in as scheduled public comment. Then I would like to have a action item to then discuss.
Yes.
And then move it forward to a recommendation. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. For that,
All
for
right.
the ATC.
For the
Right.
ATC.
And then if we decide not to go with ATC, then I would bring you a recommendation the next commission meeting.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So we have a motion and a second. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else?
No, thank you for all the letters you got. Many were very thoughtful and stuff like that. Hopefully we clarified things that tonight, that this is not a binding document. It's just a path forward, and that we need to, I know it's a lot of things going on at once, but unfortunately we're in this position. We'll just have to work through it. Thank you.
Thank you. I only have one thing tonight, and it's my thank you of the month for one of our community members and one of the people who happened to be here tonight, and then he walked out. Could not believe it, but I'd like to give a thank you to someone who has done a lot of another quiet ride. I said this about Kristen Galbraith as well, that she gets a lot done without people really knowing how much she's getting done. And this is a thank you to Mike Gomez, who I started working with him. He was on Parks and Trails when I started on the commission, so it's been 5 years. And one thing I love about him, he's very calm, very thoughtful until he's mad. And then he's really feisty. And I like that in people. I like a little feistiness. But I know he's retired military. He has, I mean, what we see in Sac Park is really not just Sac Park, but the statue and Miles Park, all of like trees.
Katie Banal.
Katie, that's not even something I had addressed yet, but definitely Katie Bunnell Park. all those improvements that you see, yeah, the city does a lot to help it along, but Mike does multiple hours of donating his time and his energy just because. So a door is falling apart, and he has this little fund that has to do with the statue that he can pull some funding from, but it's very, I mean, he doesn't get paid to, he really like gets help with maybe paying for the door that was replaced, that kind of thing. But when you look at the statue, when you look at the benches and you sit down, or at the trees, when the governor came and helped us with some tree planting and kind of a ceremonial thing for Earth Day that we had with the schools, he drove that whole process. And so he's getting more done without even being recognized than almost anyone I know in our community. So I want to thank him very much. And I wish he was here. Yes, I know. And he left. So thank you, Mike Gomez.
He doesn't like accolades that much.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
yeah.
He's probably getting stuff done.
Yes. He's at the park right now, trimming something. All right. So that's all I had tonight was the thank you. So do I have a motion from the commission for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Friedman and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please. Yes?
4.
Yes.
Or
Oh, motion passes. This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is concluded at 8:11.